I'm going to assume that if you're watching this, you're a wolf lover. No, not like that. This is not an Omegaverse video. Imagine that it's 2006 and you're 15, bored in a Borders, thinking you've read everything worthwhile, at least in the YA section, because you're not ready to transition to adult books yet. Then these golden eyes suddenly peer into your soul from a book cover. You think, could it really be a book about animals and not wolf bait that has a wolf picture on the cover but is actually about humans? You read the blurb. It seems too good to be true. Hi there, welcome to my channel, which is now called Wave Function Squared. I mostly make reviews of millennial nostalgia stuff I enjoyed as a kid. My channel used to be called George Perry's Reviews, and that's still my avatar's name. I also had an annoying assistant named Sockpaw, but he went to Sock Heaven. That is, the space behind the gasket of a washing machine. In this video, I will review 4 books by David Clement-Davies. I read the first 3 in school and the last in 2004. This story has survived the test of time. I'm going to summarize and review these 4 books. My summary of the site ended up much longer than it should be, but I'll just go with it. I'll start with Firebringer. Firebringer follows the story of Ranach, a deer. Ranach's father was Bracken, a captain in the Outriders, experienced stags who protected the herd. Every year, the stags fought for does and to become lord of the herd, but a dictator-like deer named Drail took over and overturned the system. Drail had an advisor named Score, a deer with withered antlers from the highland. The night Ranach was born, Drail and Score had their loyalists kill the Outrider captains, including Bracken. Drail wanted to kill Brecken's fawn and take Ranach's mother, Eloin, for himself, but she was warned just in time. A doe named Bracken had a stillborn fawn. Eloin and Bracken did the old switcheroo, and Ranach grew up as Bracken's child, while Eloin was taken into Drail's harem. Ranach was marked with a white oak leaf on his forehead, part of a prophecy. Bracken covered it up for a while with a berry paste, but it was exposed. The herd whispered of the prophecy, and Drail felt threatened. Bracken, Ranach, and a group of others fled the herd, which was under a military regime by then. Ranach's powers started to develop, such as talking to other animals and knowledge of healing. Several members of Ranach's group were lost along the way, including a mother and her frail fawn who decided to stay at the park. This herd accepted humans hunting them in exchange for food and safety. The YouTuber Cardinal West, who is an expert on xenofiction, has criticized this scene as being copied from Watership Down, but I think it's an homage. Finally, they arrived at the herd of a deer named Tharn, who claimed to be the last of the Outriders and took them in. Things went well at first, but then hunters chased Ranach and his friends. Ranach was assumed dead. Meanwhile, Score murdered Drail. Score also had the hots for Eloin, so her prison-like situation did not improve. Ranach's friends were given up to Score by a deer who murdered Tharn, but they escaped. Bracken had lost her mind after she thought Ranach was killed and dumbly followed them. Ranach was actually taken in by humans as a pet. While he was wounded, they kept him inside near the fire, and the fire's warmth soothed him and made him stronger, so he came to realize that there was goodness in it as well as danger. Then he was released into a corral. He could not remember the past clearly, or even his name. His only companions were the human boy, Liam, and the mole. The mole urged him to go back and help his friends, but Ranach thought he was a burden to them and didn't want to accept that he was the deer of the prophecy, and it was only when the mole pointed out that he was becoming tame did he leave. Rannoch's journey to the sea is my favorite sequence of the book. He met a wise old seal named Rural, who told him that all animals used to be able to understand one another, and they still could, if they'd only stop thinking of themselves and being afraid all the time. Rural suggested Rannoch go to the highland to find deer who may know more about the prophecy. Along the way, Rannoch saved the life of a wolf. It's a bittersweet chapter because while the wolf admitted his debt to Rannoch, they could never be friends under the harsh laws of nature. Rannoch was reunited with his friends, and they went to Hern's herd. These were religious fanatics who ate hallucinogenic mushrooms and made up rituals about the deer god, Hern. Score used to be one of them. Hern's herd sacrificed fawns. When Rannoch showed up, they immediately took him for a god. Rannoch tricked them into thinking he brought a fawn back to life when it had just been stunned. Rannoch disbanded Hern's herd. He learned that Score was kicked out because of something terrible he did on an island. Rannoch spent a few years healing animals in the highland. Meanwhile, Score took over most of the lowlands. Rannoch did not want to go to war. He was disgusted by violence. His more battle-ready friend Thistle led the army of free deer. Score sent an assassin for Rannoch, but Bracken experienced some clarity and sacrificed herself for him. She finally revealed that he was a changeling, which confirmed he was the deer from the prophecy, and he accepted that he would have to fight. But first he met up with Rural the seal again, and they discovered Score's secret, that he killed a human child and ate its heart.
That's right. She's got the munchies for a California cheeseburger.
Things were getting bleak for Thistle before Rannoch's arrival at the battle, and a handful of the main characters died. Rannoch set fire to a dry wood and arrived with a burning branch to scare Score's army. Flocks of birds came to his aid, then wolves. Finally, Score tried to push a boulder onto Rannoch, but the human Liam shot Score. The prophecy mentioned a sacrifice, and Rannoch's friends thought he would die, but it was actually that to live like a regular deer, he lost the ability to heal and talk to animals. Breather. And now for the sight. In the beginning was a castle high on a craggy precipice. The air around it was so cold that it seemed that the sky itself would crack like ice. So begins the sight, the sequel, if you will, to Firebringer. The leaders of the wolf pack were introduced first, Hutzer and Pala. They escaped from their original territory because they were being chased by the Valkar wolves, also called night hunters. The Valkar were led by Morgra, Pala's half-sister. Morgra had been kicked out of Pala's pack years ago for supposedly killing a cub. Morgra passed an edict for all newborn cubs to be presented to her. Pala and Hutzer fled to the former territory of Pala's parents. This seems like the first place Morgra would look, but fine. Morgra had the sight. The wolves had many more legends and rumors of the sight than the deer of Firebringer. Hutzer did not believe in the sight. He considered it superstition. This is one of the major conflicts in the book. The rest of the pack were introduced. Hutzer's sister Kipcha, another wolf named Kaz, the Omega wolf Bran, and the nurse wolf Brasa. Pala gave birth to 4 cubs in a cave beneath the castle mentioned in the first line of the book. 2 were stillborn. The ones that lived were named Fel and Larka. Morgra arrived and asked to join her sister's pack. She gave them 2 months to decide, but did not expect them to take her in. In fact, she was probably trying to push them away to justify her harshness after they rejected her. Pala's brother Skop arrived with a cub named Kar, whose parents were murdered by the night hunters. Skop later left. Morgra came back, and, rejected as expected, she cursed the family. May the past that's dark with crimes bring revenge in future times. Fear and guilt, here begun, let them break you one by one. The three wolf pups grew up, learning wolf legends of their gods, Tor and Fenris, and listening to their parents argue about the site and whether they should leave the old territory to break Morgra's curse. Larka began to show signs of possessing the site. She saw through the eyes of a raven. It scared her so much that she ran off, and while the pack searched for her, Pala spied two night hunters who knew the prophecy. Then the past and the future shall finally show to the wounded the secret the Lara must know, and all shall be witness to that which will be in the mind of the man-varg, then none shall be free, and only a family both loving and true may conquer the evil so ancient, so new, like the cry of the scavenger torn through the air. A courage is needed, as deep as despair. The pack found Larka, but she was next to a pit with meat hanging from a tree. Kaz ran to grab the meat, but he fell in the pit and was impaled on the stakes. Brassa finally revealed her secret, that a great injustice had occurred near the castle. Morgra had actually been trying to save a cub from a vixen, but she bit too hard and killed it by accident. Brassa saw, but she didn't defend Morgra because she thought they would be better off without her. Before passing away, Brassa instructed the pack to visit her sister Tsinga, a fortune-teller. As the pack crossed the river, Kipcha fell in the water. She went over a waterfall and was smashed to death against a rock. For now, the pack overcame despair. Tsinga explained the prophecy. The strongest powers of the site would be unlocked when the searchers, the spirits of the dead, were released. These powers would allow users of the site to control minds and matter. Then the ultimate power of the site would be given to a wolf who looked into the mind of a human child to receive a vision uniting past and future, a vision so startling that all nature should be forced to behold it. Weakened by the searchers, all the animals would be enslaved by the man-varg, or man-wolf. Hutzer finally agreed to leave the old territory. The night hunters were on their heels, and Bran sacrificed himself to lead them away. The family started to cross a frozen river, but Fel daydreamed and wandered off to the side. Hutzer yelled at him to go along a certain path, and although Fel could see a crack, he chose to trust his father. Fel fell through the ice and was swept away. Pala had a mental breakdown and attacked Hutzer. Larka was so upset that she ran off with Kar. Kar and Larka could not find their way back or hunt for themselves. Kar robbed a human village, and people set fire to the forest to drive out the young wolves. Kar and Larka were separated in the blaze. Larka decided Kar perished. Larka was found by Tsar, an old wolf who used to wield the scythe, his eagle helper Skart, and a baby they kidnapped from a human village, nursed by the she-wolf Jarla. A weak point in the story is that Jarla's background is not fleshed out. The wolves hated man. How did Tsar convince her to suckle a human baby? I'm guessing her cubs perished, explaining why she had milk. At first, Larka was despondent and angry. She had lost everything and experienced only evil from humans. She thought they should kill the baby, but she gave Tsar a chance. Bring an eagle to lead me home. Seeing through Skart's eyes, Larka traveled far and wide. Slowly, she healed, both mentally and physically. She accepted her fate. After Jarla was killed, Larka let the baby, whom she named Bran after the unfortunate Omega Wolf, ride on her back as she set off for the fortress where the vision was to occur. Meanwhile, Fel survived and was brought to Morgra. She taught him the scythe, trained him to be a killer, and made him believe he was Wolfbane, the wolf devil. Meanwhile, Hutzer and Pala were captured by the soldiers of Slavka, a wolf who built a giant pack to fight Morgra, superstition, and religion. Slavka had ordered the death of the white wolf from the prophecy, the baby, and anybody associated with them. Hutzer and Paula's identities were eventually found out. Slavka ordered them to fight each other to the death. This fight was delayed because Morgra summoned the spirits of the dead, the Searchers, who instilled fear into every animal they touched. They caused some human armies nearby to run madly onto Slavka's army. A massacre followed. Despite her slaughtered army, Slavka insisted on enacting Hutzer and Paula's punishment fight. The victor would be hobbled and wounded. Hutzer and Paula fought fiercely to spare the other a slow death. They were halted by the messianic arrival of Larka with the human baby on her back, who convinced Slavka's followers to stop this violence. Larka traveled to a spirit world called the Red Valley to learn how to banish the Searchers. The Shades tried to make her stay with them. She was called back by Kar, who survived after all. Slavka was mind-controlled by Morgra to steal the baby and take him to the ancient fortress Harja. Larka had a vision that she would die soon, but she chose to go forward. She crept into Harja the back way and encountered Fel. She tried to convince him that the world is not all about power and survival, and he was not beyond redemption, but he attacked her. In what is perhaps the most disappointing part of the book, we are never told just how this fight ended. She beat him somehow and made it up to the statue of the Romulus and Remus wolf mother, the altar from the prophecy. The altar had to taste blood before the vision could be revealed. Morgra was initially going to blind Paula for this purpose, but ended up killing Tar instead. Morgra and Larka struggled, and Morgra yielded the vision to Larka. The vision was of an ancient animal climbing out of the sea and evolving into a human. Basically, humans are animals too. The man Varg, which Larka had become, had the power to control everyone, including humans, but she rejected it. During an earthquake, Larka and Morgra fell into an abyss, as Larka had foreseen. Larka apparently visited Kar in a dream to help him heal and have hope for the future. Hutzer and Paula had 4 new cubs. Fel went off alone after returning the baby to its village. Here I will ruminate on these 2 books, which I read in high school in 2006. They are in the genre of xenofiction, that is, told from a non-human perspective. The YouTuber Cardinal West does a great job of dividing this genre into many subgenres. It's too in-depth for my purposes. Check out his video. I just want to highlight 3 types. Books where animals do not talk to each other, such as The Incredible Journey and The Fox and the Hound. Books where animals can talk to each other, like in The Sight, Firebringer, Watership Down, Tail Chaser's Song, etc. Finally, the 3rd type has animal societies where they talk to humans too, like The Wind in the Willows. The Sight and Firebringer describe a journey of animal comprehension of man. In Firebringer, Ranach overcame the typical animal fear, distrust, and ignorance of man to understanding how humans can manipulate their environment, like through the use of fire. Ranach connected cause and effect, such as when he realized the copper mine polluted a river and caused some bucks to grow stunted antlers. Most importantly, Ranach discovered that not all humans are bad. In the years up to the battle with Score, Ranach did not want to fight, and he was even put off by Buck's jousting during the rut, for it all seemed so violent and unnecessary. In the end, Ranach accepted that everybody fights for survival, but the difference between humans and animals is that the imagination of humans leads to a vast level of complexity. Animals cannot, and apparently should not, understand that complexity. To them, it just seems like humans do crazy, ridiculous things that all lead to destruction. Score, for all his machinations, was no different from these animals. He only saw the violence of humans and wanted to emulate them by eating a baby's heart. In Firebringer, Clement-Davies brought to life the vivid world of ancient British forests. It is easy to accept this as a book about deer and to see purely from the animal's perspective. With The Sight, this becomes harder. Going back to the xenofiction scheme, one of the issues I see with the second type, where animals can talk to each other but act as if they're too dumb to understand humans, is just that. If they can talk, make up myths and poetry, plan wars, discuss philosophy, and so on, what exactly is stopping them from learning human language and running for Congress? This seems like an intrinsic fallacy of this type of xenofiction, and I guess writers just ignore this problem. Besides, the animals are usually metaphors for humans. Clement-Davies tries to set up boundaries between animals and humans to disguise the metaphor. However, it's quite easy to pierce, especially in the sight. If we compare the wolves to humans, there are more similarities than differences. Though animals' poor memory is mentioned a few times, it's only shown with smaller creatures like birds who forgot how many eggs they laid and fostered a cuckoo, or a polecat who saw a wolf with a human on its back but forgot as soon as she got distracted. The wolves' memory seems perfectly fine, and it's not just Morgra who remembered because she forced herself to resurrect the hatred of her banishment all the time. Pala had trouble recalling the location of her home at first, but she finally did, much like a human who hasn't been somewhere in a while. Pala also remembered the prophecy after hearing it just once. Besides memory, the wolves also have imaginations as plentiful as humans, considering their myths, lore, and games. And as for cruelty for no good reason, Slavka, Morgra, and the Night Hunters are as bloody as the humans they hate. So then, if the essence of the vision is that man is an animal, but the animals represent man, then what does the vision mean? I guess
we are more than we are one.
Perhaps the wolves symbolize another culture, since just like humans misunderstood wolves for centuries, we've misunderstood each other even more. Plus, Clement-Davies afterward mentions that so many of the borders of fear we erect between one another are about competing narratives. But there are further nuances to the vision regarding the sight. Throughout the book, the sight grew stronger in Larka, Morgra, and Fel. After the searchers were released, the sight expanded to become startlingly similar to the Star Wars Force. Morgra and Fel became capable of controlling wolves and other animals with their minds, even from a distance. Although Larka vaguely touched the healing power to fix her burned tail, Fel used his control over living beings to harm instead of heal. He blinded one of the night hunters by moving energy around the wolf's body to burn out the wolf's retina. Though fantastical, this anatomical description leads into the true nature of the sight that Larka learned during the vision. When Larka became the man Varg, she saw out into the cosmos and down into the atoms and realized that the sight is just a manifestation of the energy that dwells in all things, and that one day man will learn to control that energy too, and bring about their own destruction. She saw that in the end, the earth will be covered in ice, the element that holds all in potential. The potential, perhaps, to start over. Though this prediction was not definite, and when Larka appeared to Kar in a dream, she gave him a vision of humans with the eyes of wolves, hope that one day humans will accept their kinship to animals and each other, respect the interconnectedness of nature, and do something about it.
Of course, Elsa. Love.
Other themes that work their way into the story include the extremely obvious conflict between religion, superstition, and reason. On the very first pages, the family referenced their wolf gods Thor and Fenris. These deities behave like Zeus and Hera from Greek mythology. They quarrel and use mortals to get revenge on each other. On the other hand, akin to Christian beliefs, Thor sent her daughter Sita to live among wolves and teach them love. Sita was then betrayed and sacrificed. In the story of Fren and the Red Girl, Fren the prankster wolf pretended to be an old woman, like the European fairy tale of Red Riding Hood. The European wolves' religion is a mishmash of human lore, and then we meet the wolf Karma from the south, who speaks of yet a different god with a flaming tail called Zostar. Unlike other books I reviewed, such as Tail Chaser's Song or Warriors, the wolves' religion is more or less disproven by the end. Though there is a magical force in the world of the site, and the Red Valley where spirits dwell is confirmed to exist, the gods do not reveal themselves. What, then, is the truth? Karma, the wolf from the south, preaches that ancient stories conceal unconscious truths, and refusing to believe in anything of wonder makes one a slave of the obvious and the ordinary. The characters were all somewhere on the scale between superstition, religion, and reason. Morgra took advantage of these beliefs. She drove the night hunters half mad with fear of Wolfbane, the wolf devil, by controlling their superstition. It's clearly meant to be ironic that these macho males, who called themselves first among the hunters, fell prey to scary stories, and that they had so many months to figure it out. Morgra made them do awful things, like kill cubs, but not one of them stood up for what was right. Morgra manipulated the family in a similar way, showing that even braver individuals can be overcome by relentless guilt and fear. Morgra pretended to curse them, and possibly the accidents that befell the family in the beginning were partially the result of mental exhaustion. For example, though Paula defended him, it probably was Bran's tiredness and lack of focus that caused them to slip and pull Kipcha into the river to her death. Perhaps Kaz's death is also an example, when he ran for a bit of meat on a string and fell into a pit of stakes. He felt like he was in a narrow ravine, driven forward by fear. The ability to control minds had not entered the world yet, so it was not Morgra's curse, but his own anxieties. Though, in my opinion, it was a bit too much. I think Clement-Davies was trying to get us to think the curse was real in the beginning, but then with hindsight, it doesn't make sense why Kaz behaved that way. He seemed like an intelligent, experienced wolf who wouldn't have made such a mistake, no matter how hungry or anxious. Another theme of the site is freedom. The story started off with the family certain that just being a wolf, running wild, and living naturally is freedom. Slavka believed that shrugging off superstition, religion, and only trusting what can be proven with the senses is freedom. Morgra suggested that freedom is wielding power over everybody else. Larka's opinion changed over time. Perhaps it's flying with the birds, or harnessing the power of the atom. It may seem like Larka was trapped in the legend, but I think she exhibited the greatest freedom of all by choosing not to escape. She only learned the correct text of the legend in the end. It is not, in the mind of the man Varg, the none shall be free. It's who shall be free. It's a question, like the ending of the Star-Spangled Banner. Larka could have run away, or used the Manvarg's power to save herself, but she chose not to because it went against her principles. Larka showed that freedom is choosing to do what is right, even when all circumstances are turned against you. This brings us to the third book, which I hated when I first read it in high school. I would have unequivocally said that Firebringer and the site are here at a pinnacle, but then Clement-Davies fell from grace. The plot's simpler than the site. After Larka's death, Fell wandered alone, kept young by the sight, depressed by the endless suffering that seems to be the only constant in life. A promising first chapter. But then entered the second main character, a 15-year-old girl named Alina. I remember my heart sinking when I read this in high school. Clement-Davies' stories were told from animal perspectives in Firebringer and the Sight most of the time. Introducing a human teenager felt like a betrayal.
Anyway, like something out of Game of Thrones, Alina was taken in by some nasty peasants as a child, masqueraded as a boy, starved, and ultimately falsely accused of murder. So she ran away, got stuck in an ice cave, and met Fel, with whom she could talk because of the sight. Then she stayed with a blacksmith and his son for a while, cued a teenage romance. Then she set off to regain her birthright, rallied her people, raided the castle of her stepfather, was reunited with her mother, and to top it all off, her biological father turned out to be alive. Good for the Mary Sue. Fel's story took a back seat. He visited his aging parents, who soon passed away. He struggled with fears of killing Alina by accident and being overpowered by the dark side. The Free Packs were threatened by a new gang of power-hungry wolves called the Vendrid. The leader believed that since life is all suffering, then one should at least be on the side that's doling it out. He challenged Fel to fight him without using the sight, and Fel beat him. These parts are pretty good. Fel had touching scenes with his parents and interesting interactions with his siblings. We should have had more of that. Fel's eventual mate, Tarlar, has a great origin story as a former Vendrid member. But these stories are just vignettes riding on the coattails of the site. They're not fully fleshed out. It's like there are two interwoven stories that did not really belong together. For example, the main human character in Firebringer is a boy who rescued Ranach and weaned him back to health. That boy feels like much more of an element of the story than Alina, but he only got a few pages. Clement-Davies is best at writing human characters in xenofiction who may carry out actions with extremely important consequences, but they don't get much screen time, such as the boy in Firebringer killing the villain in the end, or the Manvarg baby. They almost act like gods of the natural world, arbitrarily bringing life or death, aloof and hard for the animals to understand. I get that he wanted to explore the intricacies of nature from a human's perspective, but he already had it down with those vague, wistful, and limited human appearances. The teenage drama was not the way to go. What happened? Why did Clement-Davies change the format so much? I think he must have given in to nagging family members. When I wrote animal stories as a kid, it was always, "Can't you write about humans instead?" As if there's something immature about xenofiction, and there's no difference between Watership Down and Clifford the Big Red Dog. 3 other annoyances in Fel. Alina's stepfather was advised on how to turn Fel to the dark side by Morgra's freaking ghost. But it turned out Morgra had gone good, and in the end, Fel had a dream of her and his parents running up to heaven. It's just really pathetic, kind of like a fix-it fan fiction that makes everything all right in the end. Second, Alina is described as pretty at least 10 times, as if Clement-Davies is afraid we'll forget and decide she's ugly. For example, she was calm and peaceful in her sleep, and the wolf noticed her pretty nose twitching slightly. Just ew. Finally, Larka's freaking ghost tells Fel that Alina is important for the fate of the world. How? Well, her descendants will become environmental scientists or something. Cute.
We can change climate change. We can change climate change.
Finally, we come to the 4th and most ambitious Clement-Davies book. Scream of the White Bear came out years after the first 3, so I only read it recently.
Alright, people, let's start at the beginning one last time.
Ice melting from global warming made survival hard, and the ruthless polar bear Glenok wanted to take over all the free bears in the name of truth and reason. Legend spoke of a savior who would freeze the ice again. A bear named Anarga gave birth to the main character, Utek. A black paw marked him as the one from the legend. Does this sound familiar? Black paw, oak leaf, psychopath dictator. This is basically Firebringer. Plus, Glenok was obsessed with Anarga and kept her prisoner like Score did with Eloin from Firebringer. Utek grew up among the free bears. They were betrayed, and while Utek escaped with his friend Sepharga, the others were taken to Glenoc's death camp of brutal hierarchy and mass murder. After many adventures, Utek and Sepharga reached the climax of the story, which happens appropriately at the top of the world. And boy, does it take a while. A random Russian submarine popped out of the ice, and Utek went on a rant about how mankind destroys everything in their greed. There are no heroes, no gods. How can anyone change the cruel law of nature? Sepharga seemed to perish, and Utek went on a, I don't know, soul-searching, truth-seeking, world-discovering acid trip.
At first he cursed life and thought he agreed with Glenock that will, reason, and logic were the true lore, and if there weren't enough resources for everybody, then the weak should be called. Then he heard his father telling him to look toward the center, and realized the earth was spherical. Suddenly he was on the moon, watching the history of the earth, and realized that energy could neither be created nor destroyed, but only turned from one form into another, like the changing shape of the gods themselves. At first he was confronted by the loneliness of this pitiless logic, but then he imagined a tiny animal, the mythical Pyrrhic, a manifestation of the world's agony, and wanted to protect all the innocent creatures that are turned into scapegoats by everyone's hate, guilt, and fear. He was too weak to face this task, though, but then he saw a golden specter of a female bear and realized that she was the feminine part of his spirit, the part Glenock had lost. He stepped out of the underworld of his own soul, understanding that there are two languages, that of reason and that of feeling, matter and spirit, and he felt something fighting, but it was in their calm balancing that he seemed to place a brave paw trail ahead of him. He realized he had to serve life by helping free the bears from Glenock.
The beleaguered bears initially refused to believe the final injustice, that the so-called leaves weren't vacations, but mass murder. After some battles, Glenock surrounded them and challenged Utek to fulfill the legend. Utek touched the water, and it did freeze. I think this was the spontaneous freezing of super-cooled water, but it was suggested that a scientist descended from Alina did some experiment. I couldn't find what it was, and Clement-Davies didn't cite a reference. I hope to get away without mentioning this, but it's such a big plot line. There is also a story within the story, the myth of the demigod polar bear Paluk and his girlfriend Tila, told by various characters throughout the book. It's a metaphor for Utek's quests and realizations. Tila was one of the Feline, the bears who didn't believe in gods, only reason. She got tired of Paluk's dreaming, storytelling, and soul-searching and decided she liked some other guy. Dumping Paluk was not enough. She and the other Feline blinded him and tied him up in a cave. They challenged him to tell a story that would move them, but it didn't, so he used his demigod powers to kill them all except Tila. Paluk and Tila represent the two languages and what happens when they are in conflict. It's more nuanced, but honestly I got pretty tired of these two. I don't dislike the book, but I do not enjoy reading it like Firebringer and the Sight. In those books, Clement-Davies transports us into the lives of deer and wolves through stunning imagery and detail. White Bear does not. The high Arctic is occasionally described well, but I mostly just got an impression of ice, water, and a never-ending conversation.
Wow, the big blue. What's it like?
Big and blue?
I knew it.
This is not a polished product. I think the small publisher didn't have the budget for the pruning the story required. There are logical errors, a bunch of telling instead of showing, and pages upon pages of dialogue. Sometimes the characters had long conversations in situations when they were in danger, like next to a blazing fire or in the middle of a battle. Especially after Utek's soul-searching acid trip, he became preachy and the story felt like a sermon or a philosophical text. But there is still good stuff in here. If this was the book that followed the Sight instead of Fell, I think I would have been less disappointed as a kid. There is a progression of understanding from the sight to Scream of the White Bear. Everything is connected. Man is an animal too, and then everything is made of energy. What then is the sight as it relates to real life? It's magic in Clement-Davies' books, of course, but it's a metaphor. In my interpretation, the sight has four main pillars that together can bring about the fifth. The first is the power Ranach used most, communication, the ability to speak to different animals. Next is the ability to see through the eyes of others, or empathy. Then there's healing, medicine, or just the knowledge of anatomy. I group Fell's ability to melt eyeballs into this category. Finally, there's seeing into the past, or the study of history, along with seeing far-off places in the present. Altogether, these pillars can bring about the fifth, prophecy or prediction, for good or ill. Having 5 pillars lines the schema up with the 5 elements of the sight, but maybe it's just 4, because these 4 do not include Fell's power of telekinesis. If we lump these 3 together as science, and these 2 as feeling, we get the 2 languages Utek describes.
So in real life, the sight is the ability of humans to use feeling and reason to expand the borders of our imagination and change our future. When the pillars are out of balance, as they have been for all time, bad things happen. These 4 books are a warning, and while they have good reviews, better than I've given for the last 2, they don't have a high reach. Hopefully this review can help a little. Here are my final thoughts. I enjoy reading Firebringer more than The Sight because it's more of an action story. You need to be in a certain frame of mind to read The Sight, to be able to absorb its higher ratio of preachiness to action. But I do believe the message of The Sight is of great value. It was the book that helped me transition to adult literature, for while it doesn't have a very happy ending, it delivered snippets about freedom, religion, and perseverance that I needed to hear at the time.